Laowa, they release. At Laowa, they are still cooking 2 new lens. Laowa, at Laowa, they are still cooking. They released 2 new tilt and shift lens again, and they looks crazy. At Laowa, they released 2 new lens for. At Laowa, they released 2 new. At Laowa, they released 2 new tilt. At Laowa, they released 2 new tilt and shift lens. At Laowa, they released 2 new tilt and shift lens. That's really crazy. So the first one is a 35mm tilt and shift lens. Nothing special here. It's 35mm, and tilt and shift you still need to like dial the release lever, release knob, tilt and shift. And Laowa, they released 2 new tilt and shift lens. That's really crazy. So the first one, 35mm, it's nothing special. You gotta adjust the tilt and shift separately. But the 17mm tilt and shift lens is kind of cool because they rethink who will use the 70. At Laowa, they released 2 new tilt and shift lens. So the first one, nothing special, 35mm tilt and shift lens. So you still can do the separate tilt and shift. But there's another lens. But the second one, the 17mm tilt and shift lens, this is kind of cooler design because they are using like a zoom ring to control the tilt and shift, and also you cannot do both of tilt and shift at the same time. You cannot control the tilt. And the second one, the 17mm tilt and shift lens, is kind of. And the second new lens, and the second tilt and shift is a 17mm tilt and shift lens. And the second lens is a 17mm tilt and shift lens. This is a crazy special design because they are using like a zoom ring, like you zoom in, that kind of a zoom ring to control the tilt and shift. So there is no any knob to adjust and push your lens all around like that. You just need to use it like a regular lens and turn your zoom ring, that kind of feeling, then you can tilt and shift. But this lens also, but it's called a tilt and shift lens, but you can it's the 17. It's called a tilt and shift lens, but you only can do one at the time. You cannot do tilt and shift at the same time simultaneously. You gotta separate your. You can only. So I think. So I think this is really a cool design because it's mostly for architecture, photography. So I think this lens is pretty cool because I think the 17mm is pretty special because I think it's most. I think this lens is mostly. I think this lens is made for those architect photography that need perfect horizon line, vertical line. The 17mm. So this lens is pretty special. I think it's perfect for those architecture photography. You always need those perfect vertical line. So you're not going to create those miniature effect. You are only going to use it like shift your lens a little bit upward to capture the entire space or building, that kind of stuff. Yeah, you can also do. You can also. You can also turn it. You can also turn a lens 90 degrees to get those like miniature, different focal plane effect. You can also, yeah, you can still do the, you can you can still rotate the lens 90 degrees and get those different focal plane effect, like miniature effect, but you gotta choose one. You cannot do both at the same time. But the ease of use, but the ease of use for architects, but the ease of use for those but the ease of use for those architect photography, but the ease of use for those architecture photography, this is really a cool lens. I think I will buy one in the future.